Welcome to the Saturday Morning Breakfast Mix, where we highlight the highs and lows of a particular Saturday morning cartoon and maybe some weekday ones that I, as well as many of us, grew up with, and to show why these awesome Saturday morning cartoons made weekends and weekdays just the best, and why seeing them now instantly brings back glorious memories of those carefree childhood days.
In the Hyborian Age, thousands of years before the rise of modern civilization, when the oceans destroyed Atlantis, lived a riddle passed down by the people who dwell in this land, the Sumerians. The name of the riddle was the Riddle of Steel. The secret of steel has always carried with it a mystery. None more complex than a particular type of metal that is not crafted from the minerals of Earth, but comes from the sky. This gift from the sky, this star metal, holds secrets that will in turn reveal a world of adventure. A world filled with those who seek to possess this metal in hopes to use its gifts for their own selfish needs. And upon this revelation, a legendary hero will rise. Motivated to undo the spell that was cast upon his family, this warrior, this barbarian, sets forth into a world filled with many obstacles in order to banish those that have evil intentions. With the strength in his body and the desire in his heart, this hero sets forth to a world with only his sword that is the key to it all. A hero who is motivated by justice, protecting the weak and unfortunate. Fighting alongside those that also share a common bond for justice, this hero must overcome adversity in order to finally rid the world filled with monsters, wizards, and lizard men. This is his story.
Upon his family by driving the evil Serpent-men back into another dimension and vanquishing their leader, the cruel wizard Raphamon. Man of bravery, with his magic sword protecting the mightiest of warriors indeed.
Conan the Adventurer is an American animated television series adaptation of Conan the Barbarian, the literary character created by Robert E. Howard in the 1930s. Produced by Jetlag Productions and Sunbow Productions, the series debuted on September 12, 1992, ran for 2 seasons spanning 65 episodes, and concluded on November 22nd of 1993. The series was developed by Christy Marks, a television writer for various cartoon shows such as Gem and the Holograms, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe, and Captain Power. The series was produced in association with Sunbow Productions and Grants Entertainment for the first 13 episodes of its first season, with the second season being handled by French animation production company C&D, a company which was founded by former screenwriter, producer, and founder of film and television production company DiC, Jean Chapelain. The animation duties for the series were handled by South Korean animation studio ACOM for the program's entire television run. The series would even spawn a small toy line in 1992 by Hasbro to coincide with its original release through syndication. Conan the Barbarian, also known as Conan the Cimmerian, was originally created and written by Robert E. Howard in 1932 through the pages of the American fantasy and horror fiction pulp magazine Weird Tales, and is regarded as the father of the sword and sorcery subgenre. Robert was born on January 22, 1906 in Pester, Texas, but grew up and lived for the majority of his life in a small town in Cross Plains, Texas. What was once a small quiet town with a small population of 1,500 individuals would quickly grow over 10,000 as a result of oil being discovered. Various individuals would travel to Cross Plains, Texas in the hopes of striking it rich, which in turn resulted in the town being swarmed by certain visitors, the shifty and dangerous type, that made life there difficult, resulting in an ever-growing crime rate. Having a father who was a local doctor who worked from his home, Howard was exposed to the various effects of violence and death that would come from the sudden increase of crime. On top of that, with this being Texas, there were still remnants of the Old West present, as first-hand tales of gunfights, lynchings, and massacres brought on by white colonists to Native Americans were still a daily occurrence. These experiences would profoundly influence the young Howard and would contribute to his tough, realistic, and unemotional outlook on life. Learning the value of physical strength and violence as a means to confront and overcome real-world individuals who want to do harm or intimidate those who they perceived as vulnerable, Howard would train his body in the sport of boxing, and was quite good at it to such an extent that he even considered a career as a professional. Although he never followed through to this career path, these situations and experiences would seep into his writing, because for all his appreciation and love for physical toughness, Howard was an avid reader of history, mythology, classical literature, and most of all, pulp stories of that era. An accomplished poet and a professional writer with a gift of visual wording, Howard's stories told various tales of distant lands and events in time that made his stories come alive in a way few other writers of that time ever did. The never-ending conflict of civilization and barbarism were the main drive in Howard's Conan stories for the pulp magazine Weird Tales when the character debuted in the short story titled The Phoenix on the Sword in the December issue of 1932. The Conan character was written not only as the greatest warrior that ever lived, but also a noble savage. It was also through these stories that Howard would be the first to fully establish a fictional world long before J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings series by introducing its readers to the Hyborian Age. The Hyborian Age took place after the sinking of Atlantis, but before the beginning of written history, and would share various ideas and continuity with Howard's earlier stories about Cole the Conqueror, a character that was Howard's first foray into the world of sword and sorcery when Atlantis was still above sea level. Meaning that although both stories existed years apart, they still took place within one literary universe long before the idea of a unified universe would be introduced through the pages of any works like Lord of the Rings or even Marvel and DC Comics. It was through the encouragement of Howard's mother that Robert would discover his love for reading and writing, creating a strong bond between the two, which ultimately led to his untimely death at the young age of 30. Committing suicide in June 11th of 1936 after the death of his mother, who had been ill of tuberculosis for the majority of her life, many have wondered as this being the reason as to why such a talented writer would end his life in such a young age by shooting himself in the head as he walked out to his car. Both during his life and following his suicide, many have questioned the precise nature of Howard's mental health, with many debating whether it was a result of having an Oedipus complex, depression, or even just a severe case of stress. Although his life had ended, Howard's literary output, most notably Conan, would find new life outside the pages of pulp magazines. Like various writers, musicians, and artists in our lifetimes, his great success would occur after his death. Following his death, the courts would give the rights to the estate to Howard's father and in tow Howard's agent, Otis Adalbert Klein, who would continue to work in that role so that Robert E. Howard's literary works would never be forgotten. It is because of Otis Adalbert Klein that Robert E. Howard's stories about Conan would be collected and published, which ultimately led to Howard's estate and the rights to Conan changing hands. This would result in a comeback of sorts for the character in 1950 when a book simply titled Conan the Conqueror was released. Although the book was just a retitled story originally called The Hour of the Dragon, this book served importance because it was the only full-length Conan novel Howard ever wrote, as the character was only read through at the time as a set of short stories. With its success, the publisher, Gnome Press, would reprint the various Conan short stories, with the fifth being released under the title Conan the Barbarian, which was the first time that title was ever used. It was during the later volumes of the series that writers Leon Sprague de Camp and Bjorn Emil Oscar Nyberg would write brand new Conan stories, with de Camp eventually getting control over the Conan stories and oversaw more re-releases of the original short stories and rewrites of Howard's original works through Lancer Publications. These collections were the first comprehensive paperback series of Conan stories, which compiled the existing Robert E. Howard stories and various other stories written by other writers, especially de Camp, that imitated the style of Howard's original work, forming a much more rounded retelling of Conan's life. As this clearer timeline was devised by de Camp in order to attract more readers through these Lancer editions during the 1960s, this publication would also contribute their own way by the time the Ace edition of the series were released, by hiring famous artist Frank Frazetta for the cover artwork of these paperbacks. Frazetta's artwork for these covers would set the standard for how Conan would be visually represented for that time and even to this very day. With the popularity of these paperbacks making Conan a hot commodity, various other characters directly or indirectly inspired by Conan started hitting the bookshelves, fully establishing that the sword and sorcery subgenre into becoming very popular and, most of all, very profitable. In the 1960s, with the popularity of the sword and sorcery paperbacks being in high demand, comic book publisher Marvel Comics would increasingly receive various letters written by fans requesting them to make sword and sorcery comic books to add to their already popular line of books, with one of the most requested characters being none other than Conan the Barbarian. As Stan Lee was the president for Marvel Comics at the time, he understood the demand for the sword and sorcery genre and knew that it needed to be handled with utmost respect. So rather than creating their own character, Marvel sought out to acquire the comic book rights to Conan the Barbarian and would give the writing duties for the series to legendary comic writer Roy Thomas. Although at first Marvel was hesitant that the rights could be acquired, as at that time Marvel was not the powerhouse that it is currently, Roy Thomas took a chance on getting the Conan rights by arguing with Robert Howard's literary agent at the time, Glenn Lord, that although they could not afford the money for such a well-established property, they could make the character known to a whole new audience, not just for the United States, but all over the world. Much to everyone's surprise at Marvel, Glenn Lord agreed to the deal, and Conan the Barbarian hit newsstands on October of 1970. Using informative boxes rather than the traditional thought bubbles, this approach lended more to the narrative style found in the original Conan paperbacks that the original readers of the books were more familiar with, further complementing the type of stories they were trying to tell and set them apart from their already established superhero titles they were mostly known for at the time. With the popularity of the comic book, both the character and its writer, Roy Thomas, would experience popularity like never seen before. Each issue and its stories told captured the essence and philosophy that Robert E. Howard had established better than any other writer before him, ultimately making him one of the most respected writers of the Conan franchise by respecting, understanding, and honoring the original source material. Various adaptations of Howard's original Conan stories, as well as adaptations and inclusion of other non-Conan stories and characters, most notably Red Sonja, would further expand the world that Robert E. Howard had created, helping cement the series as one of Marvel Comics' most popular titles. Although the comic had to be toned down because of the Comics Code Authority, which had formed in response to a widespread public concern over graphic depictions of violence and gore in crime and horror comics, there was very little difference between Robert E. Howard's Conan and its comic book counterpart. Funny enough, Marvel and Roy Thomas would find a way to release a Conan series that was not affected by the Comics Code restrictions, The Savage Sword of Conan, in 1974. This black and white series contained more faithfully adapted Conan stories with more mature themes, nudity, and graphic depictions of violence and gore. Both these books, Conan the Barbarian and The Savage Sword of Conan, would be published by Marvel for over 20 years, thereby exposing Robert E. Howard's Conan, as well as his other characters and world, to a whole new and possibly bigger audience than it did when the original Conan stories were first published through the pages of pulp comic Weird Tales in 1932. These comic books help establish Conan's popularity and recognizability to the point that Hollywood took note. And with that, in March of 1982, Conan the Barbarian would smash its way to the box office, making over $130 million worldwide. The reviews of the film were very positive, with many praising the movie direction by writer-director John Frederick Milius, as well as the visual style used to create the world of Robert E. Howard's Cimmeria during the Hyborian Age. Being impressed from watching a rough cut of a documentary about bodybuilding, Pumping Iron, producer Edward E. Pressman was instantly impressed by the physique of one of the bodybuilders that was featured in that film and thought he would be perfect fit to portray the sword and sorcery hero. That individual? A man by the name of Arnold Schwarzenegger. After obtaining the rights to the Conan license in 1975, one which cost an estimated value of over $100,000 to obtain, it would take an additional 5 years to get the film finally into production. Associate producer Edward Summer and Roy Thomas would helm the writing duties for the first script. Roy Thomas had knowledge of Conan as he was responsible for writing the comic books published by Marvel at the time, but it wasn't until Oliver Stone was hired on board to help out with the script that everything started to move in their favor. Originally set to co-direct alongside director Joe Alves, second unit director of Jaws and director of Jaws 3D, Oliver Stone would turn down the offer and remain as a writer, while John Milius was appointed director for the film at the suggestion of the film's production company Dino De Laurentiis, after talks with Ridley Scott fell through. Having no idea of who the Conan character was, but being in love with Oliver Stone's treatment of the script, John Milius set out to create a believable world that could make the viewer believe that such a thing could have actually existed. Conceptual artist Ron Cobb, who had worked on Ridley Scott's Alien, was hired on board to help visualize the world of Conan by scaling down the fantasy settings and placed more emphasis on backgrounds that were inspired by actual architecture of past civilizations to give it a real-world feel. Being already known for his bodybuilding accomplishments, Arnold Schwarzenegger was given voice coaches to improve his English, with additional help coming in the form of the film's antagonist, Tulsa Doom, played by James Earl Jones, who would give him pointers on how to deliver his dialogue throughout the film's production to maximize his performance. The beauty of the film was that its story is told so well visually. Although the film does have dialogue, you could almost make it so that it has none and still be able to follow the movie very easily. Which is truly something masterful to behold, all thanks to the director and the people behind the scenes that made it possible to tell a simple story of revenge that translates so well into the silver screen. Although yes, it does deviate itself from the fantasy setting that the stories originated from, be it the Marvel Comics or the Robert E. Howard original stories. It's not to say that the film is completely devoid of any fantasy elements. Funny enough, just like the original Conan paperbacks that were released in the past, various other characters directly or indirectly inspired by Conan will be made by various other movie studios trying to get their hands into creating their own franchises in order to cash in on the sword and sorcery genre. Some good, some bad, and some just not worth mentioning. Well, at least we had some good VHS box art to look at as we wandered through the video store aisles, right? "10 years after the initial film, notwithstanding a sequel that received mixed reviews and a spin-off that garnered generally unfavorable reviews, and in a time when R-rated films were still made into cartoon television programs for younger audiences, Conan the Adventurer would make its televised debut on September the 13th of 1992 and would run through syndication until the series ended on November 23rd the following year. Loosely based on the Conan the Barbarian character created by Robert E. Howard, this animated interpretation was very much lighter and softer than the various versions that existed in the pages of Marvel Comics, the original short stories, and the John Milius film. Whereas the previous interpretations of the character depicted him as a fearless and untamed barbarian who had survived through various struggles he would encounter through life, be it the elements, local wildlife, rival tribes, and invaders from faraway lands, thus making him a cunning, ferocious, and wise warrior who lived by the moral code of a tribal society, a noble savage, as it were. This version of the character had more in common with sword-wielding cartoon characters of the 80s, such as He-Man from Masters of the Universe or Lion-O from Thundercats. He is a kind and caring character, albeit a little naive, who does not steal, refuses to strike an unarmed or defeated opponents, and stands up for his friends and the weak. In short, he fights for what is right. The first episode opens up with Conan, who is a mere young apprentice to his father, a blacksmith, in a peaceful mountain village in Samaria, being told of a story by his grandfather about a great battle from the past. Just as the eager youth is certain that he will be the one to lead his people if another battle from invading armies comes across his village, a strange celestial event results in a great shower of shooting stars. As the stars fall from the ground and the young warrior, along with his grandfather, run to seek refuge as they are soon bombarded with the falling stars, the young Conan is blasted by one of the nearby falling stars. But while others might be frightened by such an ordeal, the young warrior is excited and runs in the direction of one of the nearby fallen stars. It is upon this curiosity that we discover that the fallen stars are not made out of rock, but are made from metal. And in that, Conan's grandfather gives the mysterious material from the sky its name, star metal. As this is happening, we are shown a nearby city. It is in that city that Dregs, the loyal servant to the high priest and sorcerer who leads the snake cult of Set, alerts his master of the stars falling from the sky. This sorcerer, known to many as Rathamon, lays witness to what is happening outside his castle. But before anything further is said, the black ring which the sorcerer possesses calls to him, for his presence is needed elsewhere. Back at the home of Conan and his family, we discovered that the young warrior was able to gather as much star metal as he could for his father, whereupon it is decided that they should forge the star metal they now possess into incredible tools and weapons, with the remaining pieces being sold, bearing one piece for his son. At the Great Pyramid, the wizard Rathamon approaches the statue of Set, the ancient god of chaos, and asks what his master commands of him. It is then that we see that the black ring the evil wizard uses is the means to communicate to his master. For thousands of years, the great Set has been waiting for this time to come, as the star metal is the key to his liberation. But to achieve his freedom, Rathamon must first obtain all star metal pieces and build the 7 great pyramids in order to free his master from the abyss and enslave the entire world. Time passes and we see what has been done with the very last piece of star metal. Forging what would be his finest work, a mighty broadsword, Conan's father tells the young warrior he cannot be given his gift so easily and that he must first earn it. Atop a nearby mountain, the young warrior bears witness to his gift being concealed in a crypt, with his father assuring him that when the time passes and he becomes man enough, i.e. strong enough, to push off the stone slab, could he then rightfully claim the sword for himself. Several years after the star metal shower, we see that the lack of progress in finding the star metal enrages Rathamon, who commands his men to continue their search, leaving no stone unturned. At the same time, at a local marketplace, we see that the young Conan has grown into quite an exceptional human being, so much so that the young warrior was able to single-handedly defeat 3 men and set free a wild horse that they were intending to kill. We then cut back to Rathamon, who is told by an informant that the star metal he is searching for lies with a blacksmith of a small town village in the northern mountains of Samaria. Not wasting time, the evil wizard commands his followers to ready his chariot, for he intends to take part in leading this search to ensure success in finding the star metal for his master. Conan's grandfather, seeing that the young warrior has truly grown into a man, confesses to his grandson that he sees the wanderlust in his eyes. Feeling that the time has come for him to move away from his home and see the world, Conan's grandfather gives him a necklace as a good luck token in his journey. But before anything else is said, Rathamon arrives. Demanding that every piece of star metal should be given to him, Rathamon is then told by Conan's father that he had sold all the star metal. But sadly, the evil wizard refuses to believe this. As Rathamon is laying waste to the village, we see the young adventurer using all his might to retrieve the sword from the crypt to fight off the invading forces and succeeds in doing so. But alas, it is too late. For when he returns to his village, he witnesses his family being turned into stone by the evil wizard. In retaliation, Conan confronts Rathamon's minions, only to discover the secret his sword reveals, that these men are no mere soldiers, but Serpent-men. With the spell that had kept the Serpent-men hidden in the form of humans being broken by Conan's sword, a small battle ensues, and with that a new revelation occurs. Not only is the star metal the key to disrupting the magic that kept the Serpent-men secret, but also banishing them back to their dimension, the Abyss. As the battle occurs across the sky between Rathamon and Conan upon the evil wizard's flying chariot, we see the true face of Rathamon. To this reveal, the evil wizard says to the adventurer as he flees the village that those who see the true face of Rathamon must perish. With Rathamon escaping and vowing to destroy the adventurer, we see our hero coming to grips to what has happened and swears in the name of their god Crom that he will never rest until he finds a way to release his family from the spell of living stone that has been casted onto them. Befriending the wild horse that he freed a while back, Conan and the newly named Thunder travel across the vast lands of Hyboria looking for a way to cure his family and free the land from Rathamon's influence. But their journey is halted as a mysterious figure tells the barbarian that the answers he seeks are not in the nearby village but at Mount Golomira, hidden amongst the tomb of Epimetheus the Sage. Before Conan can ask more of this mysterious man, he vanishes, leaving the barbarian with more questions than answers. Following the sign of the Phoenix, Conan finds the entrance of Mount Golomira, but this is not an easy discovery. After making quick work of a rock troll, Conan is then greeted by the mysterious man, who is then revealed to be a ghost. The ghost of Epimetheus the Sage. It is here that Epimetheus the sage tells Conan that there is a war coming between humans and the Serpent-men, and that the adventuring barbarian is the only one who can stop the servants of Set. Epimetheus then explains that thousands of years ago, the demon god Set attempted to rule the earth as an immortal tyrant. Served by legions of monstrous creatures called Serpent-men, Set's sole purpose was to enslave the human world. However, the wizards of the world banded together in a rebellion against the demon god and used their powers to banish him and most of his minions away into the abyss. Unfortunately, some of Set's minions disguised as humans by way of their own magic escaped the purge and hid away into the shadows, ever so preparing for the day they could release their master and reclaim the world. Warning Conan to never let the star metal fall into the hands of Set's servants, for it is the means to his freedom, Epimetheus the sage confides in Conan that in order to break the curse of living stone, that he must first destroy the black ring that Rathamon wears. Before leaving to find Rathamon, Epimetheus gives Conan a companion on his quest who is familiar with the mystic knowledge. His companion, a baby phoenix by the name of Needle. Reluctant at first, Needle agrees to accompany Conan, as the only way to harness his full power and full potential is to do as many good deeds as he can. Taking the shield that houses the young phoenix, Conan, who Needle refers to as the Big Dumb Barbarian, continue on their adventure. Arriving at a nearby city, Conan soon discovers that keeping the secret of Needle and controlling him, especially when it comes to pomegranates, is easier said than done. Promising the young phoenix pomegranates once he has the money to purchase them, the barbarian is greeted by a local who overheard Conan's conversation with Needle about not having money and offers him work on his brother's ship as a crew member. Offering a free meal to entice our hero and not having eaten for a while, Conan accepts the offer. Sadly, this decision would be our hero's undoing, as we soon discovered that the food and drink he had consumed contained his sleeping potion, and that this town local and her brother are not just mere thieves, but devoted followers of Rathamon. With the sleeping potion's effects finally going through its course, Conan wakes up to find himself in chains upon a slave ship that is bound to the slave pits of Rathamon. It is here that Conan meets Zula, a noble prince of the Wasai. Although Zula seems educated and wise, it was his impatience that got him captured. The noble prince of the Wasai was told by his cousin, Gora, of a slave raid that was occurring in a nearby village, and that if he acted quickly, he would be able to save the villagers from the incoming invaders. Rather than waiting for backup to arrive, the prince took the advice of his cousin and headed out alone. Sadly, this was his undoing, as Zula was ambushed and captured by Rathamon's slavers. After Conan confides in Zula that he has an ally on board the slave ship, we see that Needle has awoken from the shield he resides in and is instructed by a hero of a plan to retrieve the keys from the guard when he is asleep. As night falls, the plan takes effect and is almost accomplished, but sadly, before the young phoenix can hand the keys to Conan, Needle is captured by Nekbar, a servant of Rathamon, and will now be offered as a gift, along with Conan's sword to his master. Once at their destination, our heroes are brought to Rathamon, and it is here that they discover that the evil sorcerer is no mere Serpent-man. For the black ring he possesses not only gives him power similar to his master Set, but also protection from the touch of Conan's sword, prohibiting him from being banished to the abyss. Failing to use his evil magic to corrupt the sword, Rathamon guarantees that in time he will use the sword and the power it possesses to make Conan and Prince Zula his slaves. As Prince Zula is taken away by Rathamon's guard, Nekbar presents another gift to his master, but is shocked to find that the glass bottle that was once housing the young phoenix is empty. Not having time for what he sees as a joke, Rathamon angrily disposes of the bottle with its cork, displaying the emblem of a phoenix, revealing to us that Nito possesses the ability to enter any flat surface, and not just Conan's shield, into a nearby open flame. Although Conan heroically tries to save the cork from the open flame, he is quickly overpowered by Rathamon's black ring and is set to work the quarry to learn what it means to be a slave. Later, we see Conan and Prince Zula, along with all the other slaves held captive by Rathamon, working the quarry against their will in order to build one of the many pyramids the evil wizard needs to accomplish his master's plan. Promising to assist Prince Zula in helping him free the captive slaves in return for his help in retrieving back his sword, Conan is then educated by the young prince about a phoenix's true power, that it is born in fire and not destroyed by it. As Nito awakens from the open flame and is now on the hunt to find Conan and retrieve his sword, he is confronted by dregs and is chased along Rathamon's castle in an effort of making the young phoenix his next meal. Thankfully, this proves to be unsuccessful as Nito uses his ability to enter flat surfaces to evade his would-be captor and is now back on the trail to find his barbarian companion. We then discover, in one of the prison cells housing our heroes, that the captive slaves are made to work with barely any food, leaving them broken and weak. Although they would like to fight alongside Conan and Zula in hopes of winning their freedom, their current situation leaves them at a disadvantage. But that all changes when the young prince of the Wasai reveals to his cellmates that he is a master of the sign of Jebel Sag. This gift allows him to communicate with beasts and persuade them to aid him in whatever way possible, and in doing so they are given the food that they need to replenish their strength. With Nito finding Conan and continuing his quest to find the whereabouts of his sword, the plan to start the rebellion begins. Making easy work of their captors, thanks to Zula's plan from the night before, our heroes are now on the hunt for Rathamon. With the slaves boarding a nearby ship, Conan is alerted by Nito that Rathamon intends to melt his sword along with the star metal he has collected thus far in hopes of forging the star metal discs in order to complete one of the phases needed for his master's evil plan. As the confrontation between Conan and the person responsible for casting the spell Living Stone upon his family rages on, we see that our hero is not alone in this fight, for he now has companions that do not see him as just some barbarian, but an ally, a friend, a brother in arms. Winning the battle, but only momentarily, our heroes escape to the jungle and are soon confronted by Rathamon's approaching forces and make their stand. Taking on Rathamon's legion head-on, with the assistance of some wild lions thanks to the help of Prince Zula's Jebel Sag ability, our heroes are victorious as the battle has left the Serpent-men with no other option than to retreat. Elsewhere, in the main village of the Wasai, we see Zula's cousin Gora trying to persuade his uncle, the royal king of the Wasai, that since he is next in line for the throne, that he should don the ceremonial headdress and claim his rightful place as the newly crowned prince of his people. Just then, the ceremony is halted as the true prince appears, being carried victoriously on the shoulders of the people who love and admire him. Prince Zula, the true heir to the throne and future king of the Wasai. It is here, as a true token of friendship for fighting alongside him as a brother in battle, that Zula asks Lamu, shaman to the Wasai, to decree not only for Conan to be part of his tribe, but also recognize him as his official blood brother. This meaning that if anything ever to befall Prince Zula, that he must accept all duties as prince of the Wasai. And thus, Conan of Samaria becomes Conan of the Wasai. As a feast is about to be prepared to celebrate this historic occasion, we see one individual looking on with sheer jealousy. Surprisingly, it is here that we discover that Zula's cousin Gora is an ally of Rathamon and that it was his idea for setting up the ambush in the first place in hopes of capturing his claim to the throne. The episode ends with the evil wizard commanding Gora to keep tabs on Conan and vowing to destroy him at any cost. And thus this is how the first 2 episodes end. But as these episodes end, the true adventure begins. Wandering the earth and battling Rathamon's evil forces, Conan would come across numerous other allies in his journey to free his family from the curse that was casted upon them. Allies like Snag the Viking from the Vanquished tribe, whose star metal, the axe, can cut down many Serpent-men with just a mere swing. Although they start as rivals, as their people were once at war with each other, they become the best of friends. Their friendly displays of competition are jovial and good-natured, and almost like a little brother-big brother relationship. Although very similar physically to Conan, Snag is generally less serious and is more concerned with having a good time and a good fight. The wizard from the magical city of Xanthus, Grey Wolf, who uses his claw of heaven made of star metal mounted atop his staff, allowing him to increase his magical power. Alongside his brother and sister, Sasha and Misha, who were transformed into wolves by Mesmira, the witch queen of Stygia, who is Rathamon's rival, Grey Wolf and Conan find a common bond in the fact that their journey is cemented around finding a cure for their loved ones. The winged warrior Falconar, champion of the kingdom of the Kusan, who uses his star metal whip to aid Conan and friends through their journey. Having an ally with the power of flight thanks to his family's heirloom, an enchanted cape and helm styled after a bird called the Mantle of Winds, Falconar aids his fellow adventurers in the quest of the never-ending war against Rathamon, his Serpent-men, and their master Set. And lastly, the shuriken-tossing acrobat Jasmine, a circus acrobat turned thief who finds purpose and a family with Conan and crew. Orphaned as a child who is taken in by a traveling circus, Jasmine does not find the truth until she sides with the barbarian in his noble quest, which in turn reveals a most surprising and shocking truth. To her horror, she learns that her mother serves Rathamon and her father is the Serpent-man named Astivus, making her a half-breed. Although this revelation terrifies her at first, we soon discover that a parent's love for their child is more important than serving Rathamon and Set, resulting in them choosing to fight alongside their daughter in hopes of being reunited as a family. Although our hero will face many obstacles, encounters, wizards and monsters along the way to his journey in defeating Set and his minion Rathamon, Conan discovers that he is not alone. With allies by his side that become kind of like a family to him, he has the will to go on and fight anything that stands in his way from freeing his family from the curse of living stone. Using the strength in his body and the desire of his heart, Conan is able to answer the riddle of steel. That the will that drives him and the encouragement brought on by his comrades in battle is unconquerable and stronger than anything that Set's minions will place upon him. Throughout the series' 65 episode run, we see that this will and conviction prevail through all adversities, thanks to those around him and the adventures they experience in this animated classic. Oh, did you know? Interestingly enough, Conan was not Robert E. Howard's first foray into the world of sword and sorcery in which he ushered in, but a character by the name of Kol the Conqueror. Kol, exile of Atlantis, served as a precursor to Conan, and interestingly enough, Tulsa Doom, the main villain in the Conan film played by James Earl Jones, is not a villain from the Conan comics or novels, but from the Kol stories. Comic writer for the Marvel stories, Roy Thomas, would write the script for the Conan sequel, Conan the Destroyer. This was at the behest of Universal Studios, as they wanted a more toned-down version of the movie to appeal to a younger audience with a PG rating rather than its R-rated predecessor. Although the film itself was a complete separation from the 1982 classic, much credit can be given to the film because it was able to dive into the fantasy elements more so than its previous film, which was more grounded in nature. Certain fans of Conan have even felt that the sequel was more in line to the original stories than the first film, although they could all agree that the toned-down violence was not needed. Another comic writer hired on board to assist with writing Conan the Destroyer alongside Roy Thomas was Jerry Conway, a legendary comic writer responsible for the creation of the popular anti-hero, the Punisher, as well as other amazing stories and characters for both Marvel and DC respectively, and was responsible for the very first major modern-day intercompany crossover, Superman vs. the Amazing Spider-Man. The character of Valeria, who was created by Robert E. Howard for his last Conan story in the Pages of Weird Tales Volume 28, issue number 1-3, is used in the 1982 film. Although her character in the film was more of a love interest that would eventually be killed in the hands of Tulsa Doom, the character still lives in the Conan stories and is seen more as Conan's equal rather than a lover. The character even makes an appearance in the animated series in the 5th episode of the 2nd season titled The Red Brotherhood. Resembling the version described in the original Conan stories, Valeria is a strong woman with a keen mind, strong will, and great courage in the face of danger. A strong member of the pirate crew, the Red Brotherhood, Valeria's appearance in this episode resembles more of Robert E. Howard's version of the character than her live-action counterpart. Oliver Stone had originally written 12 chapters and hoped that Arnold would return to be a part of those stories. But sadly, Mr. Schwarzenegger wanted to work on other projects and distanced himself from Dino De Laurentiis. The sequel idea was heavily implied with the film's end scene that gave away to further Conan stories down the line, but due to Conan the Destroyer not having an impact that it needed to its similar predecessor, and Arnold wanting to move away from any future Conan stories for the time being, the idea of the sequels quickly fell through. Another interesting note was that Conan the Barbarian was also the last movie released by a major movie studio with a mono soundtrack. While Conan didn't originate and even predates Marvel Comics, it was arguably that original Marvel Comics run of the character that paved way for the character's growth in popularity and resulted in the 1982 feature film, which led to his mainstream success. Although Marvel would eventually lose the publishing rights to the character in 2003 to Dark Horse Comics for over 15 years, Conan the Barbarian would return to Marvel Comics on the 1st of January of 2019 and continues to be a very popular and best-selling series to this day. Interestingly enough, there was a follow-up series to the Conan the Adventurer cartoon in 1994. Conan and the Young Warriors aired on CBS and only lasted one season, spanning only 13 episodes. In spite of being based on the previous animated version of the character, this series left fans upset as it was an even more toned down version than the Adventurer cartoon. Considering Conan the Adventurer was an already toned down kid-friendly version of Robert E. Howard's character, this version was not needed. It was more child-friendly and pushed moral lessons to its viewers, giving emphasis on the Chosen Ones, a trio of new young warriors destined to rule over Hyboria rather than the title character. Yes, you heard right, the star of the show was a supporting character. Although Conan the Adventurer was cancelled after 65 episodes, it had a somewhat proper ending, and with Conan and the Young Warriors pretty much being dead on arrival, you have to realize that these two interpretations of the character gave way for Conan's increasing popularity and exposure to even more audiences through the medium of television. Alongside the animated projects, a live-action series originally titled Conan but would soon go under its new name Conan the Adventurer, was a weekly 1-hour American television live-action series that aired through syndication from 1997 to 1998 and starred Ralph Moeller as the titular hero. Taking place after the 1982 film, this interpretation of the character was crafted as a dumb-witted, muscle-bound hero that seemed to take inspiration from the films, more importantly, how he was portrayed in Conan the Destroyer rather than Robert E. Howard's or even Marvel Comics' original stories. Seeing that at the time series like Xena Warrior Princess and Hercules the Legendary Journey were at the height of popularity across television screens across the world, one would think that a Conan live-action series would work. Sadly, looking at the series, you can see that it resembled a very low-budget, poorly written program that could not even compare to those aforementioned programs. Which is strange because the Conan character as a whole influenced so many sword and fantasy-inspired film and television characters throughout the years. And yes, I'll even throw various blatant knockoffs in that list as well. Similarly, in how Marvel Comics had created increased popularity for Conan through its comics, which led to the classic 1982 film, in 2011, when the Conan license was under the Dark Horse Comics imprint, a new Conan the Barbarian film will be produced with actor Jason Momoa in the title role. Originally intended to be a remake of the said 1982 film, the idea was soon dropped in favor of a reboot that incorporated Robert E. Howard's original stories. Oddly enough, although the film incorporated more of fantasy elements than the Arnold Schwarzenegger films, the film was considered a box office bomb and had received various negative reviews. Even in that, Conan's popularity would not diminish, as video games, action figures, statues, and other sorts of memorabilia based on Robert E. Howard's legendary character were always in high demand from fans of the original stories, the movies, and even the comics. Lastly, on September 30th of 2020, it was announced that Netflix, alongside Pathfinder Media, the studio behind such hit series as Mad Men, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Deadwood, would produce a Conan the Barbarian live-action television series. Nothing much is known about the project at the moment, but hopefully when it does ever come to fruition, that the series takes the source material seriously and does something that honors both Robert E. Howard's original stories as well as the various other writers that have attributed to the popularity of this now legendary warrior. In closing, Conan the Adventurer was a very enjoyable series. Although yes, it does have to change things in order to appeal to children, the people behind the series did what they could in order to stay true to the spirit of the original stories. The themes of honor and loyalty run rampant through the series, and while these seem to be nonsensical to a cartoon show about a barbarian warrior, you have to appreciate the fact that the series as a whole was able to give each character a strong individual personality that, together with our main hero, helped emphasize a strong sense of right and wrong in seeking out justice in a world filled with various individuals with evil intentions.
Now you must still survive.
The original Conan character was never really a hero that went on globe-trotting voyages to protect the weak, committing his life and body to the people, but a rather self-absorbed individual who did what he could for his own growth, survival, and rise to power. Although heroic deeds were performed during certain situations, he more or less displayed traits of an anti-hero, which in return made writers of the Conan stories create characters, villains that were considered worst in nature by having questionable virtues that gave Conan purpose as to why he had to confront them. Now, I am not saying that the Conan cartoon show should have taken those elements into consideration when it was being produced. If anything, I like the cartoon as it is. Because although some might find the show to be goofy, cheesy, or lame for the time, there's just something about this that made me appreciate the character even more so. The serialized storytelling that carries through one episode to another, the cast of allies and villains, each with their own backstories and motivations, actually helped flesh out the world these characters inhabited. It remains true to its fantasy roots that the previous Conan's iteration never seemed to get that were present in Robert E. Howard's original stories. This character and the world created by Mr. Howard has been featured in various forms of media over the years and still remain highly entertaining. This more family-friendly series is a great example of that. Although, even in saying all of this, Conan the Adventurer remains one of the most underrated action cartoons of the past that should be remembered among the various popular cartoons of the 90s. You'll be surprised at how much fun this show is. Sure, some stories and situations might seem goofy and often lame to some, but at the end of the day, it's still one of the most entertaining cartoons out there with some great characters, villains, and most of all, tales of adventures that will never fail to entertain. It's just amazing to know that what started as a pulp magazine character has now become something of a globally popular icon in the world he helped usher in, Sword and Fantasy. This series is a testament to that world and its characters, and I highly recommend this series. Take a chance on it, and maybe, just maybe, you might like it too. Until then, this is Edgar Velasco saying thank you so much, and remember, when it comes to cartoons we grew up with, that to truly appreciate something, you have to accept its strengths and its faults, no matter what they are, because when that happens, you can appreciate how amazing it was and how amazing it continues to be. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all next time.
Let us eat and make merry, for Crom alone knows what adventures tomorrow may bring.
At length he sought adventure in distant lands and trod the jeweled thrones of the earth beneath his sandaled feet. Until at last he found his own kingdom and wore his crown upon a troubled brow.
spell of living stone cast upon his family by driving the evil Serpent-men back into another dimension and vanquishing their leader, the cruel wizard Raphamon.